Thanks for tuning in to Proline TV, the Our Lads Football Network. And it's time to talk about Notre Dame. That's right, Notre Dame, sort of a comeback season of sorts where they actually proved to everybody that they could win the big one after an early season upset. A lot of, same old Notre Dame, but they fooled everybody. Of course, Marcus Freeman did a fantastic job. He's the hot new name now as far as young head coaches, up-and-coming coaches. All the NFL teams are asking about him, but he's staying at Notre Dame. He's trying to win a national championship, and this is going to be a big season following a huge season for the fan base and the university. So we're going to bring in for the very first time Jack Soble, who also works for blueandgold.com. That's where Kyle Kelly works for, but Kyle is going to get more into the recruiting side of the football program. So he recommended I speak with Jack, and of course Kyle did a great job. He was with me for every playoff game. It was a lot of fun. Jack, I hope we can have that same sort of relationship. Thanks a lot for doing this.
Of course, thank you for having me on. I appreciate it.
All right, Jack. So Notre Dame, yes, it was an incredible season last season. And by the way, anytime I have someone new on for the first time, I do have to ask you a little bit about your background. So did you grow up a Notre Dame fan? How long have you been covering the team for blueandgold.com? Give me the lowdown.
Yeah, so I've been covering the team since June 2023 when I graduated from the University of Missouri at Columbia. And I did not grow up a Notre Dame fan. I did not grow up a Notre Dame hater either. I kind of grew up Notre Dame ambivalent in the Chicago suburbs. We had more obnoxious Michigan fans in my class than obnoxious Notre Dame fans. So that is where that's kind of where I stood. But no, it's been great covering Notre Dame. Obviously a whirlwind of a couple seasons since I started, from the Sam Hartman experience to NIU to the college football playoff run. And I'm really, really excited to get going on a third.
Great. Yeah, we all are. That's awesome. And so what is your job right now for Blue and Gold? Because we're going to have links in the description. You can see that right now. As far as you've got a show on YouTube for Blue and Gold. You do that, I believe, every Tuesdays. Is that correct?
Yes, Tuesdays at 5. So we got an episode coming to this afternoon. It's called the Notre Dame Six Pack. It's kind of different from a lot of the college football YouTube shows you see. We kind of modeled it after PTI from ESPN, and we just go through 6 Notre Dame topics, 6 minutes on each topic. We got a cool clock and a ticker on the right side of the screen. So I think it's a good time. And if you're a Notre Dame fan watching this, would highly recommend.
Awesome. And then, of course, we'll also have links in the description for all sorts of ways that you can follow Notre Dame with Blue and Gold, as well as Jack's Twitter account, his X account. So check that out. But now let's go ahead and find out more about this year's Notre Dame team. Before we do that, let's find out about the coaching staff, because they lost a very big part of the staff on the defensive side of the ball. So tell me a little bit about the switch there at defensive coordinator, and also about whether or not there were any other major changes on the staff.
Yes, they obviously lost Al Golden, who had been Marcus Freeman's defensive coordinator since he started as the head coach at Notre Dame. Freeman hired him from Cincinnati where he was the linebackers coach. He went back to Cincinnati to be defensive coordinator in not a very surprising move. It turns out even when Golden worked at Notre Dame, his family stayed in Cincinnati. He loves the area. And honestly, I don't know. I don't have any real sources on this, but I from everything I've seen and heard, I don't know if Golden would have taken another NFL job that wasn't Cincinnati. I think he loves the area. Obviously wants to win the NFL. By all accounts, I love Notre Dame. Was not itching to leave by any means, but that opportunity was something he couldn't pass up. So they lost him. He had done a terrific job running defense for 3 seasons. They replaced him with Chris Ash, who many will know as the former Rutgers head coach. And his record there wasn't great, but it's really hard to succeed there if your name's not Greg Schiano.
That's true.
He was also the co-defensive coordinator with Luke Fickell at Ohio State when they won the national championship. Talking to some people, when they won the national championship the first time in 2014. Talking to some people, like players on that Ohio State team, a couple writers who covered them. Ash got a lot of the credit for them winning the national championship because he kind of stabilized their defense when he came in there. That before he came in, they were missing a lot of tackles. They were missing coverage assignments. They were allowing big plays. A lot of that went away when they won the title, and a lot of the credit for that has gone to Chris Ash. So he comes in I wouldn't expect the scheme to change a ton. He's repeatedly stated, like, this is not my defense. This is the Notre Dame defense. He said all the right things about, as a defensive coordinator coming in to run a successful defense, whose entire defensive coaching staff, by the way, remains in place. And they have three really highly regarded assistants, particularly the defensive backs coach in Mike Mickens, who has developed, among others, Sauce Gardner, Benjamin Morrison, and most recently Leonard Moore. He stayed, even though he's getting a lot of defensive coordinator buzz, both at Notre Dame and elsewhere. So as far as scheme changes, like, would think they'll run a little bit more zone than they have in the past. But I'd expect them to still be a man-heavy team because that's worked so well for them with their corners being as good as they are and have been. They'll also do some different things up front, maybe have the defensive ends line up a little bit wider. They're making they used to have like a rush end and a strong side end. They changed that to just left end and right end, so they're making the D ends a little more interchangeable. So small tweaks like that I would expect to see from the defense. But again, Ash has made it very clear that he's not looking to reinvent the wheel at Notre Dame. The other staff change is at running backs coach. They lost another very highly regarded assistant, Dylan McCullough, who became the Las Vegas Raiders running backs coach. So he gets to coach Jeremiah Love and Ashton Genty in back-to-back years. It's a pretty sweet gig for him, obviously. And I think working under Pete Carroll, by all accounts, was a big draw for him. But they replaced him. They went out and got Jawan Sider, who'd been the running backs coach at Penn State, where he coached, obviously, Nick Singleton and Katron Allen. So obviously a lot of excitement about that hire, and it doesn't seem like the running backs are going to drop off anytime soon.
All right. Awesome. Now, by the way, Marcus Freeman comes from the defensive side of the ball. So when he took over the job, was that one of the things that he was like, look, I'm just going to be a head coach. I'm going to do what head coaches do. And I'm going to hire guys to, sure, maybe there's a system, like you just said, in Notre Dame defense. That's the defense that I ran. It's the defense that's going to be run here. But I'm going to let my defensive coordinator do his thing. And I'm going to be the head coach for the entire team. I'm not going to micromanage my defense. Is that basically how it's set up right now?
Yeah, very much so. I think you see some of Freeman's influence, maybe not necessarily scheme-wise, but just in the way they play. Like, they're very violent, aggressive, that kind of thing. Like the ethos of how Freeman wants them to play defense, you see that. But as far as play calling and schematics, like, he very much left all of that to Golden, and I think he'll do the same with Ash.
Okay. Yeah, I said this on one of the recent shows. I think it was Texas A&M because of I think it was Elko. Yeah, talked about how these coaches, the defensive coaches, for whatever reason, they don't have like the same responsibilities of offensive guys when they get head coaching jobs. Like 99.9% of the time, if you're an offensive guy, you're still the offensive coordinator. But when you're the defensive coordinator and you get a head coaching job, it's like half the time they relinquish that responsibility. And I just think that's kind of interesting. That's all. I don't know why is the way that it is. I mean, Elko's finding it, hey, you know what? I got to reclaim that gig at Texas A&M to straighten things out because they weren't exactly where I needed it to be. But I always find that kind of interesting. Okay. Spring. How did spring go? And were there any big storylines, injuries, especially on a negative, or any jobs that were won?
Yeah, so spring, I think in general went pretty well. They looked good in the spring game. They dealt with a lot of, not necessarily like new injuries. Honestly, very few, if any, new injuries happened in the spring, but just a lot of the holdover from the playoff run last season. Like I'm sure I didn't really follow Ohio State spring practice, but I'm sure this was similar with them too. Like they had a bunch of lingering injuries, like, end of season surgeries that guys had after the title game, just cleaning up some stuff. They missed spring practice. A lot of like veteran arrests. They had a list of 10 or so guys who just played a lot of snaps during the season who had a modified spring practice just because they needed a break. Their bodies needed a chance to recover from, the longest playoff run anyone's ever had in college football.
That's right.
So spring was a little weird in that way, but I mean, they still got a lot done. They ran a quarterback battle. That was the number one storyline by far. A 3-way quarterback battle between Steve Angeli, Kenny Minchie, and CJ Carr, a senior, junior, and sophomore, respectively. Angeli wound up leaving after spring practice, and we didn't see a ton in spring ball, but you could kind of tell by what we did see that Angeli, if he wasn't behind them, if he wasn't behind the two younger guys, he definitely wasn't ahead of them in terms of the quality of his play. And Angeli's a difference in experience between those two, not just in game reps, because I think he's thrown probably about 90 college passes. The other two have combined to throw 4. But in practice reps, he's been the primary backup for 2 years. You get so many more practice reps in that role than you do the third or fourth string. So he had to be like way ahead of them to really earn the starting job out of spring practice. He wasn't. He transferred to Syracuse, where I think by all accounts he's got a good shot to start there, and he'll actually visit Notre Dame on Senior Day, which will be a very very interesting storyline there, assuming he does win the job over Ricky Collins and remains a starter. But so Kenny Minchey and CJ Carr exited spring practice as the two candidates to start. I think I would say that Carr is more likely to win. He's been kind of unofficially tabbed as the quarterback of the future for a long time. Even though he's a year younger than Minchey, he was actually committed for 6 months longer. Minchey was a late cycle flip from Pitt after Notre Dame lost on their top target in that cycle, who's Dante Moore. But Minchey, I think, in spring practice made a lot of progress. Like he's more of a dual threat guy, not the same quality of runner that Riley Leonard was, but he's certainly a more capable runner than Carr. And I think that's a dimension that Notre Dame is going to need to see a lot from Carr to live without. So I think Carr does wind up starting week 1. I don't think it's as cut and dry as a lot of people think. I think it's going to be a real competition in fall camp. Other spring storylines, the offensive line came together, even though most of them were either injured or veteran resting or something or other. There we exited spring practice knowing who's going to be the starting 5. The big key for that is Charles Jagasaw, who was supposed to be their starting left tackle last year, tore his pec in fall camp, wound up coming back from the Orange Bowl, kicked butt in the Orange Bowl against Penn State, started the national championship at left tackle. But against Penn State, he played right guard, and that performance really stuck with them. So he's going to play right guard for them. And with him in place, the rest of the offensive line, I think, sorted itself out. So we know they're starting 5 there. That group should be pretty good. Another storyline, new look defensive tackle room with Howard Cross III and Riley Mills gone. I think Notre Dame was impressed with what it saw from some returners like Gabriel Rubio and Jason Onyé, who's a guy who actually missed most of last season with some personal issues and difficulties. So Onyé came back and he had a good spring. Donovan Heinisch, we know, is going to be there. He's probably their best pass rushing defensive tackle. Jared Dawson, a Louisville transfer, looked great in the spring game. So that was a big question mark coming in because they didn't have a lot. They had it seemed like they had a lot of depth. They didn't have a lot of star power coming back. And I think I feel better about that group exiting spring practice than I did entering it.
Okay. And no major injuries that might bleed into the regular season as of now.
None that happened in spring practice, but one that actually happened during the summer. So Jordan Botello, who actually missed most of last season. It's very sad. He was a senior last year, like a 5th-year senior last year, in his last year of eligibility. He always had a good amount of talent, but he was kind of figuring it out. And then the first 2.5 games of last season, he played by far the best football of his career. He looked like a stud at their rush end position. Unfortunately, he blew out his patellar tendon in week 3. Missed the rest of last season. Comes back and he looks like he's going to be full go for the summer. Unfortunately, he tears his pec actually working out off campus when he was home during that period that they get in between the end of the spring semester and when they all come back for some workouts. So he should be out. I think 4 months was the timeline given or the timeline reported. 4 months from when from when he hurt, which I think was either late May or early June, which places his return earliest late September, latest sometime in October.
Okay,
so that will very much affect them throughout the regular season. The other injury of note is Cooper Flanagan, who projected as their number 2 tight end, but he tore his Achilles during the Sugar Bowl. So again, not a spring practice injury, but an injury that will very much affect them. And you know how Achilles go. Like that, we have no he could be back in October or he could miss the entire season. We just don't know at this point. So those are the 2 injuries that we expect to bleed into the regular season. Everything else should be good to go for fall camp.
And Flanagan, where would he have been on the depth chart?
He would have been the number 2 tight end,
Okay.
I believe. And he would have been a valuable number 2 tight end. He's got 2 good years of playing experience, good blocker. He's trusted to make the right decisions, which is big for them at the tight end position. So a bigger loss than most Notre Dame fans think, I think, especially because tight end looks a little thin at the moment. They're going to have to rely on some unproven players with Flanagan out. But yeah, he would have been, say it again.
Surprise for Notre Dame.
Yeah, no, for sure.
Question to tight end. Wow.
Yeah, we'll actually talk about this a little bit more when we get into the freshmen to watch. But yeah, behind they like the start of Eli Raridan, but I think Flanagan being there would have made them feel a lot better about the depth of that position.
Okay, so there is a chance that he could also return sometime in October.
Correct. Well, Achilles is what, 10 to 12 months?
Yeah. So worst case scenario, yeah, for a young kid too. Yeah.
Yeah. So like really optimistically, maybe October, but much more likely November, December, or he just misses the season entirely.
Okay. And when was it? When did he get the injury?
This was the Sugar Bowl on January 2nd.
Okay. Got it. Okay. So let's now move on to actually, before I go into a lot of the player questions, I want to ask you about the Ourlads depth chart here. So Tucker does a great job. He's our depth chart guru, but this is college and we could use all the help that we can get. So taking a look at the depth chart on offense, do you see anything that's completely out of whack?
No. I mean, you could kind of go back and forth about some of the receiver depth, but there are, 5 or so guys who could – like it, so the top 4 is Fields, Faison, Greathouse, Pauling. That's pretty set in stone. You have the starters right, I think. Then the other 5 guys in those second and third string spots, anyone's guess.
Sure, yeah.
5th and 6th guys, but that's obviously not something to be super concerned about. Offensive line looks good.
Okay.
Tight end looks good. I don't know if you can put an or there at quarterback, but that Cars, I guess, start as well. Defense, I would put Traore over Tui Halamak at Viper. I think Traore, when we get into potential breakout players, he's a big one for me. Defensive tackle, you could go either way. A lot of competition at linebacker and safety, but Traore over Tui Halamak is
that's the big one.
Is the big one. Like there are plenty of competitions like defensive end, will linebacker, free defensive end, will linebacker, and free safety are the ones where it's like, could very well be the guy you have, could very well be the guy behind him. Tackle too, but nothing I would rush to change at the moment.
Excellent. So it looks like Tucker did his usual stand-up job.
For sure.
All right. Now let's start first of all with transfers. And because you were talking, and by the way, you were talking about the offensive line, and I noticed that just taking a look at the guys that have left the program, the major losses were along the offensive line. Spindler, Coogan, and Pendleton are gone. So let's start off with that. Notre Dame obviously must have a tremendous offensive line, and they have for years, that they could lose 3 guys like that and still be really solid. And I guess that's why there's 3 guys left, because, who knows if they would have been starters, I guess. Maybe they would have. I don't know. Maybe they got more money, whatever. But did they, any of those losses could be called significant?
For depth, sure. For depth, absolutely. Pat Coogan and Rocco Spindler did a tremendous job at center and right guard last season. They actually got benched at the start of the season. They lost jobs in fall camp. A couple guys get hurt. They step back in. They play really well. They play really well, and they start the national championship game. But yeah, they left because they probably would not have had starting jobs in 2025. That's how good their younger guys on the offensive line are projected to be. So yeah, they obviously went to quality Big Ten programs. Pendleton to Tennessee, of course. He started week 1, but no, I mean I don't think they would have started this year. That like Spindler and Coogan might have had a shot, but I think Craig, Jagasaw, Strouth, beat them out because I mean they love those young guys in the offensive line. I personally think this is going to be Freeman's best offensive line at Notre Dame, and I think Marcus Freeman would agree. And so that's why those guys left.
Okay. Were there any other major losses? It doesn't really look like it.
Yeah, and Jelly, and Jelly is what it is. Like
Quarterback.
He lost out on a competition. Urlacher was a surprise. Is of course Brian Urlacher's son. He played in garbage time and on special teams a little bit as a freshman last year. Looked really good, but they have a ton of good young safeties in the pipeline to the point where losing him isn't the end of the world.
Okay. All right. Now let's take a look at the incoming transfers, and let's see if I can get that here. I got so many browsers open. Here we go. All right. So Fields from Virginia is obviously a big one because of his production over the last couple of years. I think he had over 1,600 yards, I think he had 113 receptions, 10 touchdowns, averaged about 14 per. So he's a big addition. And they also get Pauling, and you mentioned him as we were going over the depth chart. And that was something last year where Notre Dame didn't necessarily have a lot of depth at wide receiver, but was this really part of that? Was that they really figured we've got to load up a little bit more at wide receiver?
Yeah. So last year they brought in 3 transfers at wide receiver. It was Bo Collins, who was like a 400 to 500 yard per season guy at Clemson. That's pretty much who he was at Notre Dame. Like he was a good, probably not great, boundary receiver. Like very much an upgrade from what they had before, but definitely left some things to be desired. Chris Mitchell, who was a Florida International transfer, was a really good deep threat at FIU. That didn't translate to Notre Dame. And then Jaden Harrison, who was primarily a kickoff returner, and obviously you saw the results of that in the Sugar Bowl against Georgia, but was always going to be a depth receiver. Fields and Pauling are much more proven than any of those 3 guys were, as just proven veteran receiver options that Carr or Minchie, whoever starts at quarterback, is going to be able to trust. I think Fields is a big upgrade on the boundary. Pauling, I lean towards saying won't start, but he's going to play a ton, both in the slot and outside. Like he's a underneath security blanket kind of guy. And even a guy who, like, you hear people talk about him, like he's the kind of guy who will elevate a receiver room even if and when he's not producing, because he's someone who's going to, his work habits, kind of rub off on everyone else. That kind of guy. Fields was not here in the spring. He was, graduating from Virginia. He arrived in the summer, and I think he's going to be a really good boundary option for them.
Yeah, Pauling, I'm not sure what happened to his game last year. I know his production dipped quite a bit. I think he played a few less games too after a big 2023. But just adding both those guys, Fields and Pauling, a lot of experience there, solid production. Ty Washington, speaking of tight end, is he just going to be depth? Is that all?
He's a wild card of sorts. He certainly flashed a lot. He's got some athleticism from Arkansas. Mike Denbrock, the offensive coordinator, was telling us that like he recruited him back when Denbrock worked at Cincinnati, and then tried to get him to LSU. And then he joked that like he joked that he told Washington, like, I've been trying to get you for 7 years, so I'm going to be on you during summer workouts and all that good stuff. But so I'd expect him to contribute as a depth option. But he's an interesting one because he's got 2 years of eligibility left. So he's a bit of a raw athletic tight end option that might not make a huge impact this year, but might put himself in a position to do so next year.
And then on defense, Devonta Smith and Jalen Stroman look like the top gets here. Smith had his best year last year, 30 tackles, played in 12 games, 5 pass breakups. And Stroman, 4 years of production or 4 years of experience. Injured last year, though, and was expecting a big year after the previous 2 years when he had 98 combined tackles. So what was the deal there with Stroman last year?
Yeah, Stroman had a collarbone injury in week 1 with Virginia Tech. It actually didn't heal properly, I think. So he wound up having a little cleanup procedure on that and missed spring practice. And while he did the two younger guys, a guy named Luke Talich, Jr. and a sophomore named Tay Johnson had a really good spring. So Stroman will not be handed that starting safety job. He'll have to compete for it. But obviously he's a good player who I think might have been on some NFL radars if he had stayed healthy last year. And then Smith, we joke on the Notre Dame beat about that, maybe like endowing the grad transfer nickel position because it's their third straight year of doing this, and they've been really successful the last couple of years with Thomas Harper from Oklahoma State, and then Jordan Clark was phenomenal last year from Arizona State. So Smith probably has the most raw talent out of those three. I think he's the biggest. He's pretty big for a nickel. He's got a lot of athleticism and physicality to him. So I think they're really excited about his addition.
Okay. And the only other guys I noticed here that stick out are Jared Dawson and Elijah Hughes, the defensive tackles. Last year, Dawson in 10 games, that's at 4 sacks, which is not bad. Is he just going to be counted on to add some depth on the rotation?
I'm a big fan of Dawson. I think he's got a good shot to start. Like you see him, you see him in the spring game, like he was in the backfield all the time. Like I love his style of play. I kind of just like, all out every snap, high motor guy. He's gonna, like I said, just really, really high motor. He's the kind of guy who, like, at his size and with his play style, you probably want him playing 30 snaps a game and not 50, because he's like, again, he's at his best when he goes 110%. Might not be able to sustain that for 50 snaps. He was like a 30-40 snaps a game guy at Louisville, I suspect, for that reason. But I think he's got a good shot to start, make a huge impact in those snaps at Notre Dame.
Okay, let's talk about the freshman class now of 2025, and just taking a look at rivals because it's a lot easier for me to navigate, and they're not bad. So rivals, they were, again, I believe, 11th, and what stood out for their class, they had just 1 5-star, but hey, that's fine. 16 4-stars, and this is no surprise. You see here that 3 of those players out of the 17 were offensive linemen, including 5-star Will Black. Mm-hmm. And what's also interesting is that out of the 17, 4 came from Connecticut. Black came from Connecticut. 3 came from Greenwich, including quarterback Blake Hebert. So I'm not sure what the pipeline is there with Greenwich, but it certainly is working. So talk about the draft class, starting with Will Black.
Yeah, Will Black is supposed to be really, really good, super athletic, true left tackle. In another year, I would say he would have a shot to contribute, but they just have so much depth at offensive tackle that barring injury, which I mean, would have said barring injury about Leonard Moore last year, but an injury happens, a redshirt and transfer happens, and all of a sudden he's the best cornerback in college football. So you never know, but I'd say barring injury, Will Black is probably going to have to wait until sophomore year to make a real on-field impact, which of course is never the end of the world with offensive linemen. Other freshmen to watch, the 2 that everyone was talking about in spring practice were Elijah Burris, the wide receiver. Notre Dame does very well with sons of NFL players. That is Plaxico Burris' son. He really stood out in spring practice. Was a bit of a late riser in the recruiting process. Really started to get buzz in that winter before his senior year, and that's when he committed to Notre Dame. So he's a guy who, like, when you talk to defensive backs on the team and you ask them like which receivers are standing out, they always said Elijah Burris, just for his route running, his kind of advanced nature and that sort of thing. So he's a guy who's going to compete for playing time. They have some depth cornerback spots open. 2 of them, Mark Zachary and Dallas Golden, supposed to be really good, but they enrolled in the summer. The one guy who enrolled in the spring was Cree Thomas, from Phoenix. Actually went to the same high school as Benjamin Morrison. And Christian Gray, who's obviously one of the incumbent starting quarterbacks, said he's, quote, BMO 2.0. And Christian Gray was like, yeah, he's going to be better than me and Leonard Moore, which the last time Notre Dame cornerback said that about their freshman teammate, it was Benjamin Morrison saying Leonard Moore is going to be better than I am at Notre Dame in fall camp of last year. And I didn't think he'd be right. Certainly I didn't think he'd be right in, year 1, but I mean, he was. So when Mike Mickens, the defensive backs coach who coached cornerbacks for a long time, brings in a guy and really likes him right away, you pay attention. And that's been going on with Cree Thomas. The third guy to watch, I would say, is James Flanagan, the freshman. He has the best opportunity for playing time because, like I said, the tight end depth chart is unproven at best and thin at worst, I would say. So Flanagan, he's a guy, was a track athlete as a 240-pound tight end in high school. Really high profile hockey player too, growing up in the Green Bay area. The son of Jim Flanagan, who I don't quote me on this, but I think was on Notre Dame's last title team. Definitely played at Notre Dame. I know that for sure. But he's a freak athlete and someone who I think is going to play snaps off the bench this year.
So the top 3 freshmen, besides Will Black, you're saying are Burris, Thomas, and Flanagan.
Those are the 3 guys I think have a good shot. Madden Framo is another one who's a really good athlete and I think could play the run very well right away. He might need a little bit more seasoning in coverage from what I saw in the spring, but he's another guy who has a chance to break into that rotation.
Okay. By the way, this is you mentioned Burris being Plaxico's son.
Mm-hmm.
Is this a relation here at wide receiver? Jerome Bettis Jr.?
That very much is, yeah.
Wow.
Very much is.
In the same class too.
Yeah.
Okay.
They had Ivan Taylor, Ike's son, committed for a while, but he flipped to Michigan and later Alabama.
Okay, interesting. Wow. You're getting old and you start hearing about this.
Yeah, seriously. Well, you know who's committing later this week? Devin Fitzgerald.
Wow.
All the predictions have him at
already.
Yeah.
Okay. How's the 26 class looking? Or have you heard much about it? Has Kyle given you tips?
It's number 3 in the country right now. They've been on a huge run. They have here's another one. Thomas Davis Jr. He was one of their first commitments at linebacker. So they're doing tremendously well there. They got a Joey O'Brien, who's like a 6'4" safety, who's supposed to be a freak. I think one of On3's scouts, Cody Belair, said like he's the best 7-on-7 player he's ever seen. So a lot of promising talent there.
Okay, and talk about the quarterback. Hebert is just another talented quarterback thrown in.
Yeah, it was tough for him to like really get reps during a spring practice because they were running a 3-man competition. But they tried to get him work when they could. They flipped him from Clemson late in the cycle after their guy Deuce Knight flipped to Auburn. So he's a redshirt. We'll see down the line.
Okay. Now, this is now the more central related to 2025 than anything else besides the coaching we talked about, and that is give me some players to watch, some breakout performers, holdover guys from the team starting on offense. And because you basically have already said that the Carr and Minchie, that's obviously going to be pretty big. We're going to find out more about that during camp. And you said it's going to be closer than people think, but Carr is definitely the one that people expect to win the job. He's got the most talent. And is he more of a pro style guy?
Yeah, he's a pocket passer. He is as good as I've seen. I haven't been on Notre Dame beat very long, but he's as good as I've seen a Notre Dame quarterback at throwing guys open. Like he had a couple throws to tight ends covered by Adon Schuler, who's their best safety. Pretty good coverage by Schuler, but Carr just throws it in the perfect spot for 15, 20 yard gains. And when you see that, you're like, oh, we're not used to seeing that out of a Notre Dame quarterback. So, I think Carr, that was a Riley Leonard weakness last year. Leonard did a lot of great things. He got them to the national championship. Riley Leonard wasn't throwing the ball unless someone was wide open.
Sure.
But Carr will look to hit those tight windows, and he's very accurate when he does. He's got pocket presence, which I firmly believe is something that you can't teach. You either have pocket poise and presence or you don't. And Carr very much has it. He's a natural leader too, which really helps.
Not that it matters, but was he a 4 or a 5?
He was a 4, pretty high 4. So talk about family connections. This is Lloyd Carr's grandson.
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Which led to the crazy event of Lloyd Carr and Jim Tressel sitting next to each other wearing Notre Dame gear at the Notre Dame spring game last year. Because of course Tressel coached Marcus Freeman at Ohio State, still a very close mentor. So all sorts of crazy, if you lived in the 90s or even 2000s, you would those things about Freeman's program at Notre Dame. But so yeah, Carr and Carr Minchie, whoever wins the quarterback competition, obviously breakout candidate. Others on offense, I'm going to point to two on each side of the ball. Charles Jagasaw, the right guard, is someone they are really excited about. They think so. They're playing him at right guard in part because he was so good in that Orange Bowl performance against Penn State. Also in part because they determined that was the best way to get their best 5 offensive linemen on the field. Kind of optimize the best 5. Like Freeman said, like, Charles Jagasaw can be tackle, guard, center. Like, he's really freaking good. That's a direct quote, by the way. He's really freaking good from the head coach. Mike Denbrock, the offensive coordinator, of course, he was at LSU for a couple of years. He actually compared Jagasaw to Will Campbell, both because of their physical ability and the way that they don't make the same mistake twice and they can adjust on the fly. Jagasaw, he's like 6'7", 330 pounds, really, really intelligent player. Very much a butt kicker up front. Like he's out to finish blocks and pancake you. Technically sound too. He's a guy who if he stays healthy, and his career arc is incredible to this point because he started 2 games and it was the Sun Bowl after Joe Alt opted out at left tackle, and then the national championship a year later. So, just one of the many crazy things about Notre Dame football in the past couple of years. But he's a guy who they think is going to be a superstar at right guard and possibly one of the best players in the country.
So do they in the pros, do you think that's still going to be his position, or do you think he'll be a tackle prospect in the pros?
He could play guard or tackle.
Okay.
I think it's just a matter of personal preference at this point.
Okay.
But I mean, it's really hard. Personally speaking, it is really hard to get his Orange Bowl performance out of your head because he came in completely cold, had not played offense since fall camp when he tore his pec on August 6th. And honestly, he was a big reason they won that game because when he came in, their run game started really taking off. And of course, their offense scored a lot of points in that second half. So if we're up to me, I'd stick him at guard, but he could very well play tackle too. He's just a really, really good football player.
Okay. Anybody else on offense? And should we stay on the offensive line?
We could. There are certainly a few options there, but I'm going to go to Eli Raridan, the tight end. He's someone who Mike Denbrock, the offensive coordinator, who is also the tight ends coach, has a lot of conviction on right now. He's someone who Notre Dame loved as a recruit, but he came in with a torn ACL from high school, tore his ACL again freshman year, then came back towards the end of sophomore. Actually burned a red shirt his sophomore year, which probably wasn't a great idea. So this is his last year of eligibility, even though he's really only played 1 full season. He had some quad issue last year in spring practice. So this was even though it's his 4th year at Notre Dame. This was his first healthy spring, which goes to show you like how difficult his time at Notre Dame has been so far. But he very much got better towards the end of last season. During spring practice, you saw him a couple times and you're like, whoa, when's the last time we saw Eli Raridan move like that? And obviously media viewing is extremely limited, but when you talk to Mike Denbrock, he has a lot of conviction that Raridan is going to have a big year. And that of course would do wonders for their offense. First of all, he's got to stay healthy, but if he does, and he has that kind of year like that really completes what they're trying to do offensively.
Okay. And even though we don't have him on this depth chart, and I don't think there's much room for a 5th, Flanagan would be somebody to also just to get some potential reps. Okay.
James Flanagan, I think there's a good chance that he will play. So they have Flanagan spelled Flanigan. That's the freshman, and Flanagan spelled with an A instead of an I. That's the guy who tore his Achilles.
Okay. Now we all know about Jeremiah Love, so he's an easy one, as well as Price. But do you have anybody else on offense?
I mean, Anthony Knapp, I think, is going to have a big year at left tackle. Started as a true freshman. Jaden Greathouse is going to pick up where he left off in the national championship game. Talking to Marcus Freeman over the offseason, like they viewed his breakout in the Orange Bowl national championship as more Notre Dame figuring Jaden Greathouse out than Greathouse figuring anything out. This is pretty much a direct quote, or at the very least paraphrasing Freeman. Like when we and Riley had to figure out when Jaden Greathouse is covered one-on-one, he's not covered, he's open, throw him the ball. And that's something like I said, not a strength of Riley Leonard is trusting his receivers to make contested catches like that. But he really did in those last 2 games. And of course it paid off. I'm sure you remember his performance against Penn State and Ohio State. He's someone who they think is going to pick up where he left off.
Okay. Defense. Who's breaking out this year?
So I love Traore. I've always been a huge fan of Traore. He is someone who was probably ahead of schedule. I don't know if they expected him to be as good as he was early last season. As soon as he was, he gained a ton of muscle over the offseason. He always had really good natural pass rushing tools. He can bend the edge with the best of them. I'll never forget at fall camp 2023, which is freshman year. He was a summer enrollee. He hit some reserve offensive tackle with a nasty long arm, sent him flying. And I'm like, whoa, he can, like, the ability to convert speed to power like that. That's not something you see in a true freshman very often. So he's got a ton of pass rushing tools, and he really showed it at the start of last year. He had a couple sacks, a few tackles for loss in his first few games and first two starts after Batella went down. But unfortunately, week 5 against Louisville, he tears his ACL and LCL, loses him for the season. He's back, no setbacks, knock on wood, that we know of. And if he is the same player he was last year, I think this could be his final year at Notre Dame. I think he's that good and that natural. I think if he stayed healthy last year, we would be talking about him in the same light we talk about Jeremiah Love and that, like, oh, he's definitely gone after this year. So again, it is a big if he picks up where he left off and if he's the same player he was last year. But if that is the case, like, I think he's going to have a huge year. On the other side, Bryce Young, sorry about that. Bryce Young, son of Bryant Young, NFL Hall of Famer. It's a 6'7", 260, 270-pound defensive end. Direct quote from Chris Ashton, UDC, like, he has no idea how good he can be. Like, he's got All-American first-round pick upside. Still pretty raw at this point, but a pretty raw Bryce Young is still probably going to be a really good player, so watch out for him. Sorry about that.
Okay.
One more guy on defense.
By the way, Viper. What's the Viper position? Notre Dame? What do they use that for?
That's actually, so the Viper is like their rush end or drop end position, typically a smaller guy. But they're actually, this is something to change on the depth chart. They're doing away with that this year. They're going to do left end and right end. That's probably something I should have mentioned earlier.
So then, basically they're going to be like a standard 4-3.
Yeah, or 4-2-5.
Look, 4-2-5 look. Yeah, okay. So in that, so then in that respect, so then everything though is still okay as far as who's here, because we don't even have that second edge guy anyway, and that should be Traore and Burnham, obviously, and Young will both be getting a lot of time.
Yes, so it would not surprise me because Burnham is a really good run defender. He didn't get enough credit for the way he performed down the stretch last season. Whereas Young has just through the roof pass rush upside. Burnham's got a lot more experience too. I could see Burnham starting the beginning of the season and Young taking over by the end. That's kind of my best guess as to what happened through no fault of Josh Burnham's own, because Bryce Young is just, his upside is crazy. But regardless, both of those guys will play a lot this season.
Okay. And what happens to Osbury then? Where does he go?
He's a rover. They still use the rover when they go in with base personnel.
He's just an outside linebacker type. That's basically it.
Rover will. I think he's in the right spot.
Are they getting rid of Viper and Rover, or just Viper?
Just Viper.
Viper.
Rover still exists. It's just not as prevalent because they're a primary 4-2-5 team. But like everyone, they'll match personnel.
Got it.
They'll play 4-3 when
okay. So Traore and Young up front. Anybody in the back end? I mean, Leonard Moore, I guess we could put him on the list, even though
he's already broken out.
There's still a lot of, again, keep in mind, there's still a lot of people across the nation that are not as tuned in as you guys at Notre Dame.
So Leonard Moore is a 6'2", probably 200 pounds at this point, cornerback, who has the length and athleticism of future first-round pick, and you really saw it. You saw the potential right away. Everyone at Notre Dame was like, this guy's a star as soon as he enrolled and as soon as he started practicing in fall camp. Wasn't until probably the first round of the CFP where Indiana was like, all right, we love back shoulder throws. Let's just go after the freshman corner. And he rose to the challenge dang near every single time they tried him, with like Elijah Surratt, who's obviously specialized in those back shoulder throws, and Moore just kept blanketing him. And then you're like, holy crap, he's a number one corner right now, which it was really incredible to see. So he's a dude on the back end. Another guy who I think could really break out this year, is a Kingston Viliamuasa at linebacker. He'll compete, I think, with Jalen Sneed to start at will. He's someone who, like, he can rush the passer, he can drop into coverage, he can he can fit the run, he can block destruct, like he can really do it all. He's someone who Notre Dame believes is going to be their next like superstar linebacker. Whether that happens this year or next year is to be determined, but I think it's going to happen for him.
And I know last year Kyle had pointed out to Christian Gray, and Christian Gray had a lot of those games, some of the games where he was just like you were saying with Moore, where he's picked on. And he had some bad games, but then he also had some really good games for a young, for a pretty young corner. So where does he stand?
He's locked in starter for sure. He's someone who's obviously, they love his ball skills, they love his attitude. He's got all the confidence in the world. Never really got beaten coverage. Also, like he was tremendous in week 1 against Texas A&M. That probably is still his best game to this point. They didn't really play anyone with a competent passing offense from then until USC.
That's true.
But then USC, like he got picked on until the end of the game where he stepped up and brings back the touchdown and sends them to the playoff, which was obviously an incredible moment. It really speaks to his mindset as a corner of like on to the next play, because he was toasted in that game constantly by like Lemon and Lane, obviously really good receivers, but they kept going after him. And they did it one too many times, and he made him pay. But he's someone who if he moves on from the national championship, which the play to Jeremiah Smith wasn't really his fault. Like they called an all-out blitz. Ohio State called a 7-man protection, picked it up, and left Gray one-on-one with the best wide receiver in the country.
Yeah, I mean, come on.
Yeah, so no one is covering. Blitz doesn't get there, and you have to guard the best wide receiver in the country. No one, Leonard Moore, no one in the world is covering him.
Sure.
In that situation. So that obviously sucked for him, but it wasn't really his fault. But
how about Schuler?
Schuler's a great player who I don't think is getting enough national buzz this season. He plays fast, he's physical, good ball skills, becoming more of a leader on the back end. I like Schuler a lot. He's a guy who, like, they brought in another grad transfer safety last year, Rod Hurd the second from Northwestern, versatile, good player, but he didn't enroll until the summer. And so Schuler got the first team reps in the spring. And, you kind of realized when you're watching Schuler back then, like, oh, it's going to be really hard for Rod Hurd to beat him out. And Hurd played a ton. He was a good player. But Schuler really grabbed that starting job and never let it go. And he's their stud. He's their stud on the back end now that Watts off to the NFL.
Okay, so I'm going to close out a couple things. First of all, I know we didn't really talk a whole lot about Love, but I wanted to do that kind of just in taking a step back and taking a look basically ahead. Actually, I should say a move forward to this season. It begins with a huge game against Miami. They're a 3-point favorite on the road. That's a Sunday night game, the last day of the month of August. That's August 31st. That's going to be huge. They are 12-1 right now as the national champion, and their win total is 10.5. They are plus 125 over, minus 150 under. So even though it's a big number at 10.5, it's still Notre Dame. And when let's take a look at the schedule. So what do you think about the schedule and their win total? What's where are the landmines besides that opening game? Because right after they play Miami, luckily they get a week off to prepare for Texas A&M.
Yeah, I mean, they should be favored in every game. Like they are favored against Miami. I think it's a three-point line right now. That game's obviously going to be tough. It's going to, a lot like last year at Texas A&M. It's hot, it's hostile. New starter at quarterback in a different way. This time they're going to have a guy who hasn't played. Last year was a guy who missed spring practice and wasn't in the system. So that's going to be a dogfight. I go back and forth as to who wins that one, but you can't truly know until it happens. Then A&M, they're going to be favored, and then it's like, barring a letdown, they shouldn't lose any of the rest of their games. Like, they're going to be the better team. USC, I mean, should be solid, but they're as with every Lincoln Riley led USC team, it starts in the trenches. We don't know how good they're going to be. Boise State should be solid, but that's at Notre Dame, and they lost Ashton Genty, so they're not as dangerous of an opponent. Otherwise, like, On the road against Pitt, Pitt should be solid. Kyle Lewis is one of my favorite players to watch on the schedule. Desmond Reed's obviously sick, but a lot of questions there. So like, it's all after those first 2 games. It's just all about avoiding the letdown.
Yep.
Which obviously Marcus Freeman's Notre Dame teams have struggled with. They had Marshall and a 3-9 Stanford team in year 1. No group of 5 calamities in year 2, but they lost by double digits to a Louisville team that they were better than. And then year 3, of course, you have NIU. And then after NIU, the whole thing was about handling success. And they read their own headlines. And they were so motivated and to some extent scared because NIU was such an embarrassment for everyone involved that they just prepared for every game the rest of the season like it was a national championship. And they blew everyone else out of the water until they started playing real teams at the end of the season. So if that mindset carries over and they play with that same fear of losing to NIU, like I legit think that Miami is the only game they can lose. But if they have, a letdown week like they've had the past few seasons, like they can lose on the road to Arkansas, they can lose to Boise State or USC, they can lose on the road to Pitt. So it's Navy even should be pretty fun. They got Blake Horvath back, who's another very fun player to watch, and you never know with them, but. Notre Dame should not lose a game that isn't Miami. If they do, it would be a letdown.
Yeah, I can understand where the possibility is for them to lose 2 games and then be the under at 10-2.
Right.
Because
for sure.
Again, you're starting those first 2 games are the most difficult part of your schedule. And you would think if they win both of them, well, that means this is a really good Notre Dame team, which they could probably do anyway. And maybe they go undefeated. But if they split, then you got to run the table and you can't lose anymore. So I see where there might be some trepidation on thinking, but once you get past, like you said, I mean, the thing was with Boise, even at Arkansas and USC, and who knows about NC State? They're games that, they're better, but you have to play your best, and you do have a young quarterback and anything is possible. So, I can see, I don't think it's an easy, definitely Notre Dame take it. Matter of fact, I could even see Notre Dame being a 10-win team and still being playoff team, national championship contender. So I don't think the win total thing is the be all end all as far as the way their season goes. So that's a tricky one because the under at -150, I wouldn't do that. So I'll tell you the truth, I'd probably stay away from it. But if I was going to do it, I might actually go with them going 11-1 in the regular season. Yeah,
11-1's my pick, and like you alluded to, like there are plenty of games where if Notre Dame doesn't play well, they can lose. They also it's weird to say like they have probably one of the least, if not the least, top heavy schedule in college football because they play 2 group of 5 teams who both should be in contention for the group of 5's playoff spot, Boise State and Navy. The rest of their schedule is made up of Miami, A&M, USC. Arkansas is a mid-tier, if not low-tier SEC team. Bunch of mid-tier, if not low-tier ACC teams. So it's like it's definitely a better schedule than last year, but there really aren't a lot of games that Notre Dame should lose if they're on.
Okay, so Love. I don't think the national audience really knows how good he is. The injury during the biggest time of the year was a big blow. Not to mention all the other injuries they had last year. I don't think people realize that too. I don't think the national fan base really understands how many key guys that really were not available for Notre Dame, and he still came that close to winning the national championship. But tell me about what you think Love can bring. Can he be? I don't even know. I'm going to go check and see what his Heisman number is, but how good could he be?
So I want to touch on the injuries thing real quick.
Sure.
That was the most resilient football team I've ever seen at the college. And obviously I haven't been doing this for too long, but they fought through so much. The depth of that team was truly incredible because they were on like their backup center, backup right guard, their third fight. You have Tui Halamaka in the starting spot right now. And like, I don't think he's going to start, but last year, the 2 guys ahead of him went down. He was out of the rotation week 1. He steps up and has a huge Sugar Bowl. It was a big reason they won that game. So the way so many guys who like at other programs would have transferred out midseason just stayed, stuck it out, and stepped up when their name was called was truly incredible and rare in 2024-25 college football. But on Jeremiah Love, best running back in the country, and I don't think it's close. I don't think it's I don't think it's fair to him to really call him a running back. He's just a weapon, and he adds value to Notre Dame in ways that typical running backs just simply do not. I'm a big proponent of positional value. I think it's really rare to have a running back who can impact the game like that, but he really, really does. He's obviously you have the speed, you have the shiftiness, you have the hurdling ability. He got a lot stronger from freshman to sophomore year. He can truck people now. The way I like to describe him is like off the field, he's an introvert. He's a bit of a quiet kid, maybe even a little shy when you get to know him. But on the field, and he's a psychopath. Like he is truly out there to embarrass you and degrade you as a defensive player. Like it is, and it is incredible to watch. He's a great runner. He's a good receiver. The coaching staff has said that is his next step. They would like to use him as a receiver more. If anything, that's the coaching staff next step because they felt like they did not design enough opportunities for him to make plays as a pass catcher. So that I think is going to be an adaptation of the offense in 2025. He's better than people give him credit for as a blocker too. Like he said that, like everyone's like, oh, he would have 30 touchdowns last year if Riley Leonard wasn't on the team. Love, on the other hand, like Leonard had talked about Love standing next to him when he calls a quarterback run, and he's pointing at the defensive end. He's like, I'm going to lay your ass out. He has that kind of mindset. He's so unselfish. He's not going to win the Heisman because he's not going to get the ball enough. Like he's not going to get an Ashton Jeanty workload or even close to that. But he doesn't want it. He wants to stay fresh for the long haul. And obviously he suffered an unfortunate injury last year, but he knows that NFL teams like players with more tread on their tires, and B, that there are plenty of good running backs behind him. So he's gonna concede carries when on other teams he wouldn't. And that's just the kind of player and person he is. He is so unselfish. He is so good. And he's just a joy to watch play football.
Yeah, I was looking at his Heisman numbers, and look, none of the running backs are getting any love. As that's just the norm now, as far as the Heisman Award is concerned. Yes, Jeanty won it, but look at what Jeanty had to do in order to win it.
Right, he touched the ball 350 times.
It's crazy. Yeah. And it wasn't like he was a runaway either, where he should have been. He's 45-1 Love. And look, if he was 15-1, that's something else. But at 45-1, I'm throwing a few bucks on him. Sure. Because if Jeremiah Love goes out there in those first two games, which everybody's going to be watching, and puts together a couple of huge games, a couple of highlight reel type plays, that is what you need to start your Heisman campaign. You have to have those types of early season wow moments in big spots where people remember you, and especially the program, it's Notre Dame. So I think that's worth the wager there. But you're right. Running backs are just so hard, let alone to go back to back. So yeah, I think it'd be really hard, but it is a big number at 45-1. I think it's worth it. So
the other thing is like you mentioned, the two big games, opportunities to really make an impact early. Like typically with Heisman moments, voters would prefer to see them late in the season. So and he's not going to get very many opportunities to do that.
That's true too.
In November. So with that, the fact that he's not going to have he's probably going to have like half 60% of Ashton Jeanty's workload.
Yeah.
Last year, I don't think he's going to win the Heisman. I do think he's a really good shot to make first team All-American.
Sure.
Walter Camp just came out. He's a preseason first team All-American. He's probably going to be preseason first team All-American by every outlet. I think he's got a really good shot to do that. Heisman, probably not, but I don't think Love particularly cares about winning the Heisman, to be honest with you. I think he's very much bought into the team success thing, and I think he's gonna have a really good year, provided he stays healthy. Not gonna win.
Yeah, I think they're a really good choice too to win the national championship at 12-1. I don't think that's too low of a number. Again, a lot's going to look. You might even decide for yourself whether or not you want to wait until after those first two games, because if they lose one of them, the number will drop, and you can take advantage of that because again, they could run the table, and then maybe you get them at 15-1 or something like that. But I wouldn't risk it. I just go after them. If you think they're going to be a playoff team, then I think 12-1 is pretty solid, especially like you said, and what we talked about, what Marcus Freeman was able to do with his team last year with all the injuries. Yes, they have a completely different quarterback structure. Instead of a veteran, they've got a young kid. I mean, the dynamic there is just, night and day, but still, I think it's worth it. So I think they're definitely a team that could win the national title, and we'll look forward to hopefully having the type of campaign we had last year when we went on a nice little ride with the blue and gold. So I know I'm looking forward to at least talking to you, Jack, maybe before the Miami game. Maybe we can do something to kind of preview the Miami game, and then maybe even get you on for the Texas A&M game if I can twist your arm there. And then who knows, at that point, I'm going to talk to you for a while with the schedule the way it is. But anyway, the link's in the description. You can check everything out as far as blue and gold, Jack, everything else to follow Notre Dame football all season long. Jack, I appreciate it. I know you've got a show you're doing, like you said, at 5:00 today. So, and those are those live on the channel?
Yep, live on the channel. Notre Dame football on blue and gold is the name. Live every week. If you can't make it live, feel free to watch it back anytime. Yep, we have a lot of fun there, and looking forward to it.
Jack, thank you. Great job. Very informative. Appreciate it. Kyle made the right call, and I'll look forward to talking to you before the Miami opener.